Well, Martin, welcome to our talk about your strengths and your philosophy. And present yourself for the listeners here who perhaps don't know of your work and about you. Where are you? What you've done, and what are you doing? And why are you talking to me?
Why am I talking to John? Well, we're talking to each other because we both have our hearts in the education system. I've been a teacher, educator all my life. I've reached the age where I'm trying to retire, and that gives me a chance to look back on what I've done. And I've been in the academic caring profession that is the life of a teacher, taking care of the student and their learning. And as I've grown as a teacher, I've focused more and more on the person and less on the subject. I used to teach mathematics, which comes as a shock to people who've only got to know me in the past 10 or 15 years. I also used to teach English, and that was in primary school, secondary school, adult education, freelance out to companies in West Sweden, where I now live. I live in Gothenburg, although I'm from the UK originally.
Mhm.
And yeah, we've been talking for quite some time, on and off, John. So
Yeah, so the past few years, I've admired your approach and your philosophy, and the coaching. And you've written many books too, on stories that you collect in books and through your conversations with other people. But I think one thing that we have in common is you see the teaching profession as also as a coaching profession. And in my world, we don't need a teacher training; we need a coach training, because that's what good teachers are doing, and they're taking on the characteristics of good coaches. I think you'd agree with that.
absolutely.
Um,
It's one of the add-ons that teachers need, and when they get it, they
right.
really love the tools that are available to them through
Mm,
coaching, or a coaching approach,
mm,
which would be slightly different to coaching because that's a profession in another
oh,
direction. If you're a
okay.
teacher, you can still use all the coaching tools, but you
Mm,
don't have to become a coach.
no.
So
But
it's
then
quite
explain a little
different.
bit about your philosophy of coaching approach to it. I mean, if you were to have a group of teachers in front of you and explain to them, here's a way of thinking about building relationships and trust with the kids,
Mm,
and helping them out, and how would you suggest to them they go about it?
yeah.
Your
Well,
life's work in
often
3 minutes, of course.
in my last fucking three, often if I try, for example, and I'm sure you've experienced this, I'm an unknown person to them. If I come in and start telling them stuff,
Mm,
they may or may not accept it because of who I am, because of my credentials or whatever.
mm,
I found it much better to kind of just give my introduction as a person. I mean, like I did just now, there's a little bit of professional thing there, but I also mentioned I have children, they're teenagers and they grew up and, that kind of thing. And then I connect the profession that they have as a teacher with the profession that I have as a coach. And I do that by sharing some of the skills that a
mm,
coach has,
mhm.
but I don't tell them that these are the skills that a coach has. I said, tell me,
Uh,
do you use, and it's kind of leading question, do you use any of these skills? And I got a slide with 5 skills on it about managing progress and accountability. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Designing actions. Yeah, yeah. Motivation. Of course, all of these things teachers do all the time. And then I show them, I got 11 in all. I showed them first 5, then 6, and they're all on board. Yeah, 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 this is what we do. No, okay, yeah, I'm a maths teacher, so I don't do only that. I do maths as well.
mm,
And over there, you've got an English teacher, and they do English as well. But what they have in common is those
mm,
same students. And they need to motivate, point a clear direction, manage
mm,
accountability and progress. And then I go, these are the 11 coaching skills that one is trained in to become a coach.
mm.
And that makes a connection between the two of our professions, so they
Okay.
see that what they're already doing is at least in the world of coaching. Now, it's a question of degree. How much of this do they do? Not much. And in some cases, quite a lot. If there's a need, if a student is very needy of support and direction, it's more about coaching the student than teaching the subject. So then I get a lot of positive reaction from special needs educators that they have different names in different schools. School counselors, for example, they will say, yeah, this is what we do, but we don't call it coaching, we call it counseling. So yeah, getting the teachers to realize that, yeah, they are also coaching, which, by the way, my very cheesy popular comment is, which is why you should be paid twice. You should be paid double the amount because you're doing two jobs. That never gets a boo. That never gets a thumbs down. Unfortunately, I don't have the power to give them that.
Well,
So that's how I get started.
Okay, because I find it important, and one of the challenges I have in my role is that to get teachers to understand what their job really is, or what their purpose is, or what their role is, because they define themselves as, they would of course define themselves as a math teacher or a physical education teacher, not as a coach. And I say, well, you can say I am a coach and math is my
subject,
my subject or my vehicle. That's how I do it. Because in my world, the definition is to help the kids understand that they can learn. That it's possible, and if they have that idea, they can learn. Then they'll learn. If they don't have that idea, they can learn. Then they won't. So the coaching skills come into that.
I tell stories rather than tell them.
Right.
So I'm a bit of a storyteller. I tell stories at the drop of a hat. And I have a few favorites that I use that I know go down well. I talk about, for example, once there was a head teacher who had two new teachers at the beginning of the year, but only had one contract. He said, I will review at the end of this year which of you will carry on and have a job, which is something teachers can recognize. His criteria for will you have a job was not what you might expect. It wasn't how much have the students learned, it's how willing are they to continue learning. And I offered the two stories, either A, the head teacher, and put yourself in the position of a head teacher, how much have the students learned, or B, how willing are they to continue with that teacher? What's the best criteria? Of course, they argue that both are necessary, but if you had to weigh one against the other, it's the desire to learn. If you kill that off, then there's nothing will happen next year. So yeah, and then sports teachers are into this. They know that if they howl and shout at someone who's failing at throwing a javelin or whatever, do you still do that? Yeah, I guess you might do.
Yes, they do.
You know that if you ridicule someone for failing, you will kill their enthusiasm for even picking up the javelin or whatever again. So somehow, because they are more performance measured, how far can you throw this thing? They know that they have to work with the drive of the student who they want them to continue to want to fail until they succeed. And that's more obvious in sports for some reason, or maybe a business teacher. They seem to have a little doorway to coaching. Maybe executive coaching at some point has touched their lives. But for the majority of teachers, they don't know what coaching is, or if they do, they've got a very negative experience of it. And obviously they're not going to say yes or have any of this coaching stuff that they don't like yet.
Can you share a story of a sort of a very difficult situation under it could be either with a teacher trying to explain your philosophy or one of the students or a group of students you work with, but sort of like a turnaround. It was very difficult, but you got them to think a little differently.
Turnaround's my thing. So I'll pick one of a teacher to begin with, and I'll pick one of a student after, then you can choose which one or both if you like. I was assigned to work with a particular teacher who was, I think he was about 50 years off, plus or minus a few years. He was about 50. Very experienced, very confident in himself. He knew how to teach. And he couldn't understand why the head teacher had sent me, a coach, to him. He didn't need one. I'm not struggling. You can go and work with this new teacher over here. And I had to persuade him to give me the time, respect the fact that I have come here on command to be with you for an hour. At least let us do that. So we had a lot of natter as we went to the staff room, poured a cup of coffee. And I think I said something like, tell me about how you teach. So he unloaded all of that. And then he paused. Great news for a coach, because that means the person's out of rhetoric. You want the pause. And at that point, I said, are you ready to hear about coaching? He said, you know what? Because you listened to me, because you gave me the respect that you required of me, I will listen to you. So I told him what coaching was in a few words. He said, okay, I'll try it. The observation of his lesson led to coaching, which led to more observation. So it was like a cycle. One of the lessons I saw him perform brilliantly as the teacher he was. Caring, knowledgeable, very friendly with the students, and they weren't afraid of him. They respected him in that kind of warm, huggy bear kind of way. The subject was biology. They had a book full of pictures and diagrams, and he basically read the book with them, adding in stories of his own. It was a demonstration of knowledge of biology. And then the coach asked him a difficult question. How much have they learned from your lesson? And when he couldn't answer that, how do you know? Well, he argued that they do really well on the test. I said, yeah, I'm sure, but that's, weeks from now. How would you know how much of your teaching has gone into their heads now? So he decided to use something that was new for him, called a slip test or an exit test, where you test the student's knowledge, not to give a grade, not to give any formative feedback, but it's an anonymous collection of how much of my teaching has landed. The next coaching session, he had a look on his face like he'd been shorn from top to toe, like, oh God. He said that the results were less than monkey level, which was basically less than guessing level. Had they guessed, they would have scored higher. So,
okay.
So he had no connection between his teaching and their learning. That was a real shock, but at the same time, it was small enough, it's a bit like an inoculation, that he could handle it. Like, okay, it was just one lesson. But we realized that the students, good students, they went and studied, right, for the exam.
Right.
So the measure of his success was the students' hard work, not his teaching. That was a wake-up call of size 10. So
it's wonderful. But how did you get him to? You've explained a little bit, but you were doing something to get him willing to accept you and willing to listen and willing to try. And what you've said is that you got to the pause. I mean, you showed him that you were willing to listen, and you were giving respect, letting him talk. And
I
then
think
the
it
pause
comes from, I wait for the pause. So it's patience. It's a depth of experience. I know this works. What I'm doing, I know it's going to work when he gives me permission. There's no point me doing anything right now. I just have to be in the moment of basically of hearing his defenses crumble. He's an experience, he's done this, he's done that, blah, 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 done. There's no more defense. And I'm not in a ping pong conversation. I'm just letting him talk. I'm listening, I'm showing respect, I'm hearing what he's saying. and I'm pulling out what else. What I want him to do is drop his defenses. If he's not willing to be vulnerable, then there's no doorway in. And always, the permission is implicit. I ask a question, he doesn't have to answer it. But because someone asks you a question, you feel that, wow, that's an interesting question. How do I know that my students are learning? I should be able to answer that. That's a valid question for a teacher. And it came from me, curiosity. That's another one. Honestly, I was really curious about his process of teaching.
I'm gonna make a switch. I know you have a story about a student, but I'm gonna move on and make a switch. Okay, so what you're telling me, I'll pick up on the last word you use, your curiosity. You don't have to name any names, but I want you to think of a person that you've had a difficult time reaching recently, that perhaps showing more curiosity towards them would be an opening. Is there a person that comes to mind?
Absolutely. I hate him. He hates me. We are very alike, I guess. He was friends with somebody who had the office next door to mine. So we would bump into each other in the corridor of our not exactly shared space. And he was a nasty, I know why he upsets me, but he was a nasty, weaselly, pointy fingery detail, and I got under his nerve because I was all flippy floppy and woolly and whatever adjectives were pissing him off. Anyway, sometime later we met by coincidence or by the universe having a wonderful time with us on a station platform waiting for the same train. So here was the universe saying, okay, guys, you've got an hour of journey here, or you can. So I decided I would go up and ask him, do you find me as difficult as I find you? Is there something we can discuss here? And he said, yeah, I do. And you're right. I've had a long time the thought that I should speak to you about what it is. And after, we didn't become the best of friends, but we understood what it was in me that triggered him and vice versa, and how doomed we would have been as a couple. Not that we want to be a couple, but it's just like, this is just matter and antimatter meet. You know, you're going to get.
Well, this is a little bit different than curiosity. Curiosity is one thing, which is part of that story, but not many people would use that direct approach. You know, going up to the person.
Both coaches. So
okay, but still,
yeah, it was a bit bold. It was a bit bold.
Any other person that in the future, in the next week, that you're curious about, and that person I'd like to make a call or try to meet, or it could be a relative, it could be a colleague, it could be a neighbor. So yeah. Is there a name that pops up? You don't have to tell me the name, but is there a person that pops up?
Isn't that funny? Stories all come from the past. So when you say story, I went straight to the past. So I can imagine there are quite a few neighbors that I walked past. Yeah. Okay. All right. I've got one.
So next time you walk past that person, you can.
Well, do you need to make eye contact? Pause, stand still, and find not an excuse, but find so that it's not about them and me. It's about lovely weather, isn't it? Something outside of us that we could talk about, and be in that moment of potential. We don't know what's going to happen. Now, they might not be curious at the time. They might be busy digging weeds. I don't know.
Sure. But there's something common here, because I'm looking for commonalities in your stories, and one of them is the pause, because your first story was about, okay, he talked, I waited for the pause, fine, and your other story was about finding the time to sit and confront, but there's also a willingness to listen. And your third story about your neighbor is finding a reason to pause.
Usually, yeah, you need an excuse.
I mean, you have to admit that you can you're a talker. I mean, you can share it, and you're good at telling stories. But all of the stories you've told, an ingredients to a sort of a breakthrough has to deal with not talking.
Yeah. I would say not just curiosity, but suspend disbelief.
Ah, okay.
And I think I've got that from some story about the cinema, that when we go to the cinema, we know it's not full of rockets and sharks and fast moving trains. We know it's only light on a screen. But for a moment, we are willing to suspend our disbelief and believe that what we're seeing as true. It's why we willingly do, we even pay for it. Same thing applies to going on a scenic railway. We know we're not going to get killed.
But that's this suspending. What did you call it again? Suspending.
Suspend disbelief.
Suspend disbelief. Isn't that what good coaches do too? I mean, you're not
absolutely
going into the situation and say, "Well, he's like that," or "She's like that."
We would
suspend disbelief.
Phrase it more positively. We would hold the belief that everyone, particularly the person in front of us, because otherwise, to offer this gift to everyone at the same time. But as people come in front of us, we hold the belief that they are both creative. I mean, in their own nature, they are creative. We don't have to make them creative. They are healthy and they are whole. Because if you think they are not creative, oh, you can't think of the answer, you're a bit stupid. My thinking about you in that negative way gets picked up.
Okay, absolutely. So what we're going to round off our conversation soon.
Okay.
But an advice to teachers, suspend disbelief or start believing the possible and wait for the possibilities.
Initial step is to remove the bad habit. So just a very quick example. One teacher had issues with a very energetic student. Lots of noise, lots of right answers, lots of desire to contribute to the lesson in his way. They were at loggerheads often during the lesson. She couldn't teach because he was there. So my flip the mind was to ask her to consider the possibility that he is her greatest gift. And it was like, oh, come on. I said, well, what if this person was your greatest gift? Now that's me holding someone I've never met as fully capable, competent, creative, whole, healthy. No, he's not got a diagnosis. No, he's healthy. He is who he is. What use could you make of him if you have this vision that he is the most useful person in the room? And suddenly she realized that she's got a sparring partner for all her dialogues that she was having by herself. She could bring the student up and have a dialogue in front of the class with him as a co-teacher. Jeepers, did he feel honored and respected and brought up to the high level that he thought he had for about 3 minutes when he realized, oh, I'm not as good as I thought I was. And he wanted to go back. But she was able to pull on him. But it wasn't the solution of that problem that was the big thing. It was she realized that she'd been her own worst enemy in believing he was a difficult and challenging and awkward and something was wrong with him. That was the problem. Anyway, I met this person a couple of weeks later and she said, almost everybody in the class is a treasure now. Because they've all opened up.
Okay. And I'm asking you because I like to stop with something that's very concrete. Maybe one of your neighbors is a treasure. And
absolutely.
That's your homework, is to explore.
Explore the neighbors. Sure.
Explore one neighbor. Just find out something more that you didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Martin. And what was this? What did you get out of our talk? What was a reminder or a...
Just how quickly I go back to old stories.
Okay.
I sound like an old person. In the war when I was a kid, that kind of shaky voice and the story from the past. And both of those stories I have told before. Both, they're all in my books.
Well, their learnings, their stories are wonderful. They're great, and it's nice to look back. But maybe the learning from the stories, and okay, what's happening tomorrow, and
Yeah, yeah,
whom do I need to talk to, and what do I need to do, and what is the
yeah.
challenge ahead?
Well, it,
Um,
it, it happened quite recently. We had a new heating system put in,
mm,
and my neighbor came round to ask about it.
mm,
We've been living in this opposite each other for 30 years. I haven't
mm,
spoken with him because
mm,
he's deaf. He can't speak.
mm,
I don't understand him, I thought. But
mm,
since we had a common thing to talk about,
mm. It worked.
he came not to have a conversation with me, but about the heating system because he was thinking of having one.
Mm,
So suddenly we're best friends. We've gone
sure.
from avoiding looking at each other because it's I haven't said hello to you for 30 years. I'm not going to do it now.
Mm,
To say hello, and I
mm.
understand. I can go cheese or elephants. He doesn't hear anything. He'll
Well,
see this.
well, it's in general. I think what you do and what good coaches do is try to connect your life experiences with the new challenges and moving forward. And that
True.
example with the neighbor is wonderful in that respect. You had to suspend your disbelief that you couldn't communicate.
I had to dump 30 years of belief that this man and I could not communicate. And I've seen him speaking to other people, but I've always thought, no, I can't speak to him because I
Well,
don't speak Swedish very
all right.
often.
But now your biggest challenge is to suspend disbelief
Disbelief
that the educational system can't be changed. And
and
I
change
would need that too.
exactly. Change the rhetoric rather than saying, oh, look how bad it is, which will just reinforce that. Say, look what's changing. Look what's changing. Yeah.
I
And
think your
that's done by
skills.
stories.
I think your skills are very important in making that effort, and I wish you continued luck. And I hope that we can encourage each other in those efforts. So I'm going to stop the recording now, and thank you for our talk. And then let's talk a little bit in a few minutes too. Just a second.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.